Critical Thinking, Skills and Strategies for Success and Making Smarter Decisions. Written by Adrian Tweely. Narrated by Weston Gritt. Chapter 1. Definitions and Attributes. Critical thinking can be defined as learning to think better by improving one's thinking skills. Individuals who are critical thinkers use the thinking process to analyze and synthesize what they have learned or are currently learning. Unfortunately, much of everyone's thinking tends to be biased, imprecise, unclear, uninformed, or prejudiced. Since this becomes severely limiting, critical thinking is needed to improve its quality and value. Within the organizational setting, critical thinking is necessary for overcoming problems, making changes, modifications or adaptations within work structures, methods and problem-solving situations, resolving situational conflict and pressing issues, and inventing and implementing new ideas, techniques, and solutions. Critical thinking development is a gradual process. It requires mastering plateaus of learning, as well as maintaining a serious focus on the process itself. Changing personal habits of thought, which tends to be a long-range project, and extensive development time. Within the process of critical thinking, it is important to recognize what does not comprise its basic elements or components. Critical thinking is not accomplished by saying something without carefully thinking it through, taking a guess at what one thinks should be done, memorizing material to analyze, discuss, or examine, doing something just because it has always been done, believing something because it is what everyone else tends to believe, or arguing something when there are no facts to back up the argument. There are many definitions to what is critical thinking. That's to be expected. Critical thinking encompasses much of what we do when using our brains. Words like reasoning, interpreting, observation, and more are used to describe critical thinking. Phrases are also used, such as rational thinking, focused thinking, cognitive process, reflective thought, and informed opinions. Other phrases, such as analyzing and evaluating information to derive a judgment, are also used. What are the benefits of critical thinking for you? There are three answers to that question. 1. To make informed decisions. Making informed decisions is essential in your life. You have to decide on everything from where to have tomorrow's lunch to what career to pursue. The more you are able to tap into your experiences and knowledge, the better your decisions are. 2. To understand. Your ability to comprehend is another essential element in your life. You are exposed to a wide array of information on television, the internet, books, magazines, and people. Understanding leads to opinions and decision-making. For example, by reading about and comprehending the positions of two political opponents, you are better equipped to make an informed decision on how to vote. To create, invent, and discover. The ability to create, invent, and discover are human traits that exist in us all. We create beautiful art, writing, music, and more. We invent things like the light bulb, the computer, and rockets. We discover things like E=mc², penicillin, and DNA. The ability to create, invent, and discover all require decision-making. It is an integral part of each process. There are decisions in choosing a project to pursue. Whatever you pursue, there are decisions along the path. The ability to make and carry out informed decisions by efficiently utilizing your lifetime knowledge, experience, common sense, reasoning, intuition, feelings, and confidence. Critical thinking requires the use of self-discipline and self-examination. The rewards are great freedom and the ability to complete projects, achieve objectives, and answer questions with confidence. When you take charge of your mind using critical thinking and make sound decisions, you take charge of your life. Critical thinking is a skill. It will be strengthened by anyone willing to stretch and grow. The brain acts like a muscle. If used, it strengthens. If shunned, it withers. Examples of critical thinking. A driver must use critical thinking when they are on the road. After asking a question such as, "What is the best route to my destination?" the critical thinking process begins. First, the driver must reflect on the question and decide which route will get them to their destination the fastest. Then, the driver must come to a specific solution to the issue at hand. Lastly, the result of their critical thinking will be a solid plan to follow through with. Deciding whether to go on another date with someone also involves thinking critically. First, you have to decide whether another date will benefit you or not. You may think about the different outcomes that could occur and evaluate the risks versus the gains. Eventually, a decision will be made from your judgments, and a definite outcome will follow. Critical thinking does, however, promote creativity. The act of pondering a new idea, evaluating that idea, and deciding a creative solution is part and parcel of your child's evolving critical thinking skills. Being able to observe and evaluate, make a judgment, and eventually draw your conclusion are the necessary steps towards solving any problem. In order to do that, you must be able to think ahead, evaluate what if, and decide which would be the best means of achieving the solution. Teaching our kids the ability to think ahead cannot be understated. Most children live in the here and now. Most kids don't take the time to think too far into their future. In some respect, with the sexting that is going on, today's teens aren't either. I believe that if those teens had been exposed to some critical thought processes earlier, they would have been able to think their actions ahead and evaluate, wow, this might not be a good thing to do. The ability to tell the difference between a fact and an opinion is directly related to a person's critical thinking skills. Possibly, that is why so many today are falling for the rhetoric of today's politicians, rather than deciding for oneself. Critical thinkers are doers. Followers are rarely critical thinkers. It doesn't take much thought to follow someone in front of you. You just engage your feet and move. How many times did your mother say, "If Tommy jumped off a bridge, would you do it too?" Of course, you answered no. But how many of our kids today are following blindly along after their leader, good or bad? Chapter 2. Critical Thinking Qualities. There are certain qualities critical thinkers possess, and these characteristics tend to categorize individuals as deep thinkers, which separates them from more typical, basic thinkers. Critical thinkers tend to be self-disciplined, self-directed, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinkers. They raise essential or crucial questions and problems and then proceed to formulate them clearly and precisely. Critical thinkers gather, assemble, evaluate, and appraise relevant information. They come to well-reasoned deductions, conclusions, and solutions, while measuring and testing them against relevant standards and criteria. They also keep an open mind within alternative systems of thought, while continually recognizing and assessing their assumptions and lines of reasoning. Finally, critical thinkers communicate effectively with others in seeking out and determining solutions for challenges and problems. There tends to be 6 developmental thinking phases that lead to mastering the art of critical thinking. Through extensive practice and applications of the process, individuals can expect to begin altering and eventually changing their individual habits of thought. Each progressive phase is described below. Phase 1. The unenlightened thinker. Individuals generally are not consciously aware that significant problems do exist within their current patterns of thinking. Phase 2. The confronted thinker. Individuals are aware that existing problems are evident or apparent within their processes of thinking. Phase 3. The novice thinker. Individuals try to initiate improvements within their thinking, but without relying on regular or consistent practice. Phase 4. The proactive thinker. Individuals do recognize the importance of regular practice to improve and enhance their thinking. Phase 5. The developed thinker. Individuals begin to advance in accordance with the amount of practice that is awarded to the process. Phase 6. The mastery thinker. Individuals become skilled and insightful, where reflective, analytical, and evaluative thinking becomes second nature. Individuals can only develop through these phases if they accept the fact that there are serious problems with their current processes and methods of thinking, and are able to accept the challenge that their thinking presents to them and make it a point to begin regular practice to improve and enhance the components and elements of critical thinking. Critical thinking relies upon clarity of purpose. In order to develop critical thinking, it is important for individuals to be clear as to the purpose of the task or topic at hand, and the main question that is at issue in regard to. To accomplish this goal, it is essential to strive to be clear, accurate, precise, and relevant. Practice thinking beneath the surface. Be logical and fair-minded. Apply critical thinking skills to all reading, writing, speaking, and listening activities. And apply these skills to all aspects of work, as well as in life in general. Questioning, the impetus for critical thinking. Dead questions reflect dead minds. Unfortunately, most individuals, even managers, leaders, and trainers, tend to not ask many thought-stimulating types of questions. They tend to stick to dead questions like, is this going to be what is expected from now on? Or, how are we supposed to understand this? And other questions that outwardly imply the desire not to think. Some managers, leaders, trainers, or facilitators, in turn, are not themselves generators of in-depth questions and answers of their own making, which aids in establishing non-critical thinking environments. These individuals are not seriously engaged in thinking through or rethinking their own initiatives, issues, concerns, topics, or instructional concepts, and resort to being mere purveyors of the questions and answers of others. Questioning through critical thinking keeps the organization alive. Every company stays alive only to the extent that fresh questions are generated and taken seriously. These questions are then used as the driving force for generating and implementing changes. To think through or rethink anything, individuals within an organization must ask questions that stimulate deeper levels of thought. Questions define tasks, express problems, and identify issues, while answers, on the other hand, often signal a full stop in thought. Only when answers generate further questions does thought continue to add value in terms of personal as well as organizational growth and change. It is important to remember that individuals within an organization who generate and ask serious and insightful questions are the ones who are, in fact, truly thinking, developing, and learning. It is possible to move an organization forward by just asking employees to list all the questions that they have about an issue, method, or topic, including all questions generated by their first list of questions. However, deep questions drive out thoughts that rest underneath the surface of things and force individuals to deal with complexity, while questions of purpose force individuals to define their task. Questions of information force individuals to look at their sources of information, as well as its quality. Chapter 3: Historical Background of Critical Thinking. Philosophy and psychology both started as a study of the human condition and the thinking process. From the musings of the philosophers came the sciences of behavior and mental processes. In earlier times, the study of psychology and the human condition were considered to be a part of the study of philosophy. In ancient Greece, attempts were made to create the ideal society and the truly happy individual. Pericles were seen by the people of Athens as a great leader in this effort. He was elected to his position of leadership in Athens over and over again. He wanted Athens to be strong and powerful, and the people who lived there to be prosperous and happy. He carefully developed policies to win the world and gain an empire by commerce rather than by war. Since Athens was dependent upon imported food, they built a powerful navy to guard the routes by which that food came. The people were wealthy, happy, well-fed, and proud of themselves. But as history soon proved, they were very short-sighted. They were only interested in their own well-being, and not that of others. Cities subject to Athens provided funds for the defense of the trade routes against the Persians. Much of this money was used for the adornment of Athens. While liberty and democracy were the policy among the designated citizens of Athens, the rest of the Greek Confederacy was ruled by force as an empire of Athens. Jealousy and resistance to Athens existed everywhere. Sparta, Athens' old enemy, knew the strength of the Athenian fleet and contented themselves with supporting resistance and slowly forging a united front against Athenian power. If you had been a management consultant or advisor to Pericles, what advice would you have given him? Surrounded by enemies, abroad and at home, Pericles worked for and talked about peace while he very carefully prepared for war. He stockpiled food and supplies. When war came, Pericles thought the answer was simple. He withdrew the population of the entire surrounding area within the walls of Athens and waited for the navy to win the war. The Athenians thought this was a smart policy. The crowding of Athens, however, led to a plague, which raged for nearly 3 years, killing a fourth of the soldiers and a great number of the civilian population. The people blamed Pericles for this great calamity, and they convicted him for misusing public funds. He was disposed from office and fined. But when no one could be found to lead them, they forgave him and recalled him to power. To show their esteem and sympathy for him, they even overrode one of their own laws and bestowed citizenship upon his illegitimate son. Pericles had, however, been infected by the plague, and he grew weak and died within a few months. Under Pericles, Athens had reached her zenith, her golden age. But that success had been attained through the wealth of an unwilling empire and through the use of power that invited almost universal hostility. Does this have any parallel with our current definition of success? Win at all costs. After Pericles, there was no strong leader, and Athenian democracy became almost mob rule. One leader after another did whatever they thought would placate the citizens and win their votes, regardless of the wisdom of the policies. It has been said that the Athenian population was so used to having all the wealth and power, it wanted that they became free of any moral scruples. They wanted continued prosperity, and they wanted the rest of the world to pay for their empire. They elected whoever promised them the most luxury and comfort. Finally, the unthinkable happened. Sparta, under the leadership of Lysander, sank or captured a large portion of the Athenian fleet. The Athenians were willing to do anything to preserve their power. They melted down the gold and silver from the statues on the Acropolis to pay for a new fleet. They gave freedom to slaves and citizenship to anyone who would fight for the city. The new Armada successfully defeated the Spartan fleet, and Athens thrilled with the news of the victory. Their status was preserved. News was brought back from the crews of 25 of their ships, sunk by the enemy drowned in a storm. Hotheads insisted that the 8 victorious generals should be put to death. Is this notion of something terrible has happened, someone must pay for it, the basis for any public policy decisions and legal proceedings today? Socrates, as a presiding officer of the assembly, objected to such a plan, but it was presented and passed over his protests. The sentence was carried out on the shocked generals who had expected a victor's welcome on their return. A few days later, the assembly repented and condemned to death those who had persuaded it to execute the generals. Sparta was weak from the last battle and wanted peace and some kind of agreement between them, but the Athenians would have none of it. Athens sent a newly reinforced fleet to meet the Spartans, thinking this would be the end of Sparta. The battle was a complete failure for Athens. All but 8 of the 208 Athenian ships were destroyed or taken. Sparta now took the upper hand and became absolute masters of the Aegean. Athens was blockaded, and within 3 months their stock of food was exhausted. Sparta demanded that the walls of Athens be destroyed. Athens had to agree to be subject to Sparta. Gone was their empire and their prosperity. The empire that Athens had carefully built all around the Mediterranean was now destroyed, and those who had been appointed by Athens to rule this empire were required to return to Athens. The new Athenian government was now led by those who had been forced to return home. They were an unhappy lot and not pleased at the lack of proper financial rewards for their leadership. They confiscated property, sold anything they could, and either exiled or put to death any and all dissenters. They wanted to rule Athens the way Athens had ruled its empire. They put an end to freedom of teaching, assemblage, and speech. They forbade Socrates to continue his public discourses. The reaction to all of this created an eventual overthrow of the government and the establishment of a new democracy. But the new democracy was looking for scapegoats for all of their troubles, and they found one in Socrates. It was all his fault. He was convicted of corrupting public morals and put to death. After his death, the Athenians regretted the decision and in turn put his accusers to death. Athens was exhausted. Gone were the dreams of wealth and empire. Gone were the leaders who gained favor by encouraging efforts to placate the citizens and the struggles for power. The irony is that the new legacy of Athens came from the teachings and students of Socrates. It was all they had left. They turned their energy to the study of philosophy and how to better the human condition. Socrates had not been content to observe from a distance. He had been involved in the very center of the decision-making process of Athens. He actively taught what he thought was important. He believed that self-examination was the most important activity for the human brain. He said, "Vice is the result of ignorance. No one is willingly bad. Virtue is knowledge. If a person has problems, it is because they have not examined and questioned their knowledge and beliefs. In other words, the mind is in charge of the body, and introspection and self-examination will modify behavior. Perhaps we could call Socrates the first cognitive psychologist. His student, Plato, was certain that knowledge is not the same as perception. He felt that perception can fool a person and therefore cannot be trusted. It is best to know what is real and what is not real based on pure logic and reason. He wanted to know the best way to organize society and construct governmental systems. Every time he attempted to put his theories into actual practice, they failed. He had no system of obtaining a reality check and testing his ideas because of his belief that human perception was faulty and could not be trusted. Plato defined the task of psychological study of perception. Charles Hobbes came along much later. His philosophy was that to think too much about your condition in life would bring unhappiness. Self-examination and introspection are unhealthy and unnecessary. You must simply accept the fact that your status in life is determined by your birth. Some are born to rule, and others are born to be ruled. Life is very simple. Accept it. The English did very unthinkable things. However, that challenged this approach. The English population executed one king, and after a brief fling with a republic, invited the son of the ruler they had executed to become their king. What gave the people the right to depose one ruler and then establish another? Karl Marx looked at the world around him and saw poverty on the one side and wealth and power on the other side, and came to a totally different philosophical view. He said that happiness is always destroyed by an emphasis on production to create profit and the obtaining of property. The notion of profit would always lead to the subservience of the individual. He believed that all of this could be changed if private ownership were abolished and production based on needs of the community, rather than the whims of individuals with power and the need to create profit. In order to bring this about, it would be necessary to have a government with absolute power to wrest property and power away from the rest of the individuals who have it now, and share it equally with everyone. Eventually, this would create a community where all shared everything in common and all would act for the common good. His thinking created a school of thought in direct opposition to that of John Locke. We have seen that this kind of philosophy created a philosophy which had as a main focus to teach individuals to accept their subservience to the group. The class warfare began by Marx continued in the writings of his followers. Milovan Dejalis saw some basic flaws in this approach. His book, The New Class, maintains that to follow Marx only changed the groups that had power and that did not have power, but would never lead to a classless society. This kind of independent thinking only caused his arrest and long imprisonment for being an enemy of the state. The German philosopher Nietzsche tried to get back to Socrates. He said that each individual must examine his or her own life and learn by interaction with others. He wrote against what he called the slave mentality of his time, which he felt exalted conformity and mediocrity. He said that the highest values in life and true happiness are most fully realized in life through great individual efforts, particularly in artistic and intellectual achievement. He felt that the religious and political system of his day were barriers to the development of human potential, not because they were religious, but because they were so rigid. Great minds, in fairly rapid order, began to attempt to organize and structure the study of the human condition. Wundt established the first organized and accepted psychological approach, based on introspection and the workings of the inner mind. William James looked for how and why of the behavior and how the mind was influenced by the environment. The Gestaltists were interested in looking at the whole picture. They did not focus on a scientific approach, and their concepts remain today mainly as an attitude or an approach, which tries to look beyond the specific to the general issues. In his psychoanalytical approach, Freud focused his attention on childhood experiences and sexual energy. Watson and Skinner and the behaviorists felt that if you could not directly observe something, it may as well not exist. The focus was on observable behavior. This created a scientific approach in the study of the nature of human nature, and led to psychology being considered a science instead of a philosophy. For many years, the behaviorists ruled the discipline of psychology. No one else had yet figured out how to study more complex aspects of the human condition scientifically. A researcher must not have a personal agenda to prove. A researcher must be open to the discovery of the truth, no matter where that discovery might lead. He needs to be aware of the deficit model thinking, where we gain the perception that anything which is different than how we think is not just different, it is deficient. Nature of concept. As an example, in the past, both philosophers and psychologists have been involved in the nature versus nurture debate. Now we have gone beyond that simple concept to a much more complex one, in which we have begun to look at the degree to which biology and genetics contributes to personality and behavior in each unique individual. With what we know, we must deal with trying to understand to what degree environment and genetics influences each specific individual. Current research seems to indicate that any one individual's personality can be determined anywhere from 20 to 80% by genetic factors. With an even greater challenge, this new understanding creates to help each individual sort out all of the relevant issues affecting a specific situation. Are we then in some way determined or influenced by our genetics, or totally free to think and contemplate without any restraint or predetermined inclinations? There may be no real, clear, unequivocal answer. But to the best of our ability, we need to use our brain to ask questions, to challenge our understandings, and be open to discovery, not set in concrete. Philosophy of critical thinking. Critical thinking is described as the systematic search for knowledge through rigorous probing, questioning, and logical analysis. It is an inexhaustive and unending search for true knowledge. One cardinal philosophical theory that assists learners in engaging in critical thinking exercises with the view of unearthing undiluted knowledge is the Socratic philosophy of questioning. This philosophical theory was propounded by Socrates, who was a Greek philosopher and teacher. The Socratic approach to questioning is described as an examination and exploration of ideas in depth, logically, through questioning with the aim of validating those ideas. It is based on the practice of disciplined, thoughtful dialogue. In this technique, the teacher pretends the ignorance of the topic in order to engage in dialogue with the students. With this acting dump, the student develops the fullest possible knowledge about the topic. This time-tested approach in philosophizing can be used at all levels and is a helpful tool for all teachers. When teachers implement this approach effectively, it can promote and enhance independent thinking in their students. Also, it will give the students mastery and ownership of what they are learning. Higher-level thinking skills are present while students think, discuss, debate, evaluate, and analyze content through their own thinking and the thinking of his peers or mates in the same class. There are some helpful tips that can guide the effective implementation of the Socratic philosophy of questioning. First, the teacher has to plan the significant questions that provide meaning and direction to the dialogue or topic for discussion. Secondly, the teacher needs to use the wait time, thus allow some time to pass after posing the question for the students to think about it. Preferably, 30 seconds or more will suffice as the waiting period. The third action that the teacher engages in is to ask probing questions to solicit for the views of students on other dimensions of the lead question posed. The teacher must periodically summarize the key points in the discussion by writing them on a board. The fourth action on the part of the teacher is to draw as many students as possible into the discussion. Lastly, the students are made to discover knowledge on their own through the probing questions posed by the teacher during the discussion. The Socratic philosophy of questioning is indispensably relevant in a discipline such as drawing. There are various forms or techniques of drawing that requires that a teacher engages his students in critical thinking via the Socratic philosophical approach. In the teaching of still life drawing, nature drawing, figure drawing, descriptive drawing, abstract drawing, as well as imaginative drawing, all require the implementation of critical thinking, so as to come out with a creative drawing that perfectly reflects the ideas of the theme. However, the writer would gear the implementation of the Socratic philosophy of questioning to imaginative drawing, which is a hard nut to crack among senior high school candidates who sit for the West African Senior High School examination, General Knowledge in Art Paper 2. Usually, the theme for the imaginative composition, which is to be composed exclusively from the candidate's own ingenuity, is given. For instance, students can be asked to compose an imaginative drawing of angry football supporters at a stadium or an angry mob at an election center. These themes are really interesting, but become very difficult for students to brainstorm and come out with breathtaking, creative scenes in drawing. What can the teacher do to help his or her students? This is when the Socratic philosophy of questioning comes to the fore. He needs to skillfully use questions to assist the students to envision and create mental pictures of the scene before they craftily put it visually in realism on the paper. Using the first theme as an example, the teacher can ask students to describe a football stadium. What are the clear signs of a football stadium? How can you describe it? How is it different from any other sporting stadium? How is the weather condition like looking at the time football matches are mostly played in Ghana? What is the demeanor of football supporters when they arrive at football stadiums? What about their dress codes and facial expressions? What can be the possible causes of anger at a football stadium? How will you visually represent the facial expressions of an angry person? How will you render the figure and posture of an angry football supporter? How will such a visual figure representation differ from that of a happy or jubilant supporter? What negative actions does a group of angry supporters engage in? When that happens, how do the security personnel manage the situation? These probing questions will definitely draw out all the students into the discussion. Their former fears with an imaginative composition of that theme will gradually be waning. They will feel more at ease and courageous to take up the task. Noticing this, the teacher furthers his probing questions on the appropriate media, drawing, and shading techniques that will be very appropriate to use for the execution of the work if the question is silent on it. For instance, the teacher can ask, which drawing technique or techniques can best paint the imagery of angry football supporters? What kinds of lines will be appropriate and can be used in composing a scene that shows haziness, anger? Which shading techniques will best suit an angry scene? Which of these will best be appropriate and why? Mass shading, smudging, hashing, cross-hatching, criss-cross, or squircling? What about the composition scene? Will a one-scene composition be appropriate? Can it portray the major events anyone would like to see in a football stadium with angry supporters? What advantages will a multifaceted scene have over a single-scene composition? Chapter 4. Logical thinking. Logical thinking means a way to analyze a problem to come up with an answer, sometimes using a formal system similar to mathematics. Common sense is a way of taking social understandings and rules and applying them to a situation. In my opinion, that explains the difference in the most simplest form and easiest way to understand. Logic is used to reach a conclusion using the most accurate route available to us. Common sense, however, is not always accurate and can sometimes be based on assumption with no facts. Let's look at an example of the two and how they could apply in our everyday lives. At the end of every month, you go to the cash point machine and find you are always overdrawn. Common sense would tell you that you are spending more than what you are earning. Logical thinking, you would do this. Go home and analyze your outgoings and discover exactly where the money is going. You may discover that the bank has been overcharging you every month, in which case, that statement above that you are spending more than what you are earning is actually incorrect. Logical thinking is extremely powerful. Take that above example. I have done that, and logical thinking led me to then shuffle my bills around, get better deals, and save a fortune, as well as get my money back from the bank. If I had relied on common sense alone, without further investigation or analysis, then I would still have been overdrawn every month. If you have problems of any kind, take a moment to jot it down on a piece of paper. Break it down, analyze it, and look at tackling the problem with a logical mind. You will be surprised how the simple exercise can make a problem so much easier to solve. Many people today worry about issues concerning money, health, jobs, retirement, children, etc. However, many people do little about tackling their problems in a logical manner. When these problems arise, emotions kick in, and logical thinking is a process which should involve no facts based on emotion. It has been proven that people who think logically are smarter. They reach more accurate results and conclusions. They are people who reach a conclusion based on facts and accurate analysis. Incorporate some basic logical thinking into your life now. You will have wished you had done it years ago. Thinking is a process based on thoughts that try to understand reality and find solutions to various problems. Logical thinking means thinking according to the principles of logic. Logic is a collection of thoughts that judge reality. In other words, logic is a particular method of reasoning. Thus, if we want to improve our logical thinking skills, we have to improve our capacity to judge reality. We have to be able to make our judgments according to the principles of logic that will better help us analyze the reality we are judging. However, since logic is a particular method of reasoning, how can we be sure that we are following the right method when we judge reality? There are many different logical structures, which means that there are many different methods to judge the reality we are observing. We may follow a misleading method. Instead of reasonably judging reality, we may make a totally absurd judgment. If the logic we follow is based on absurd thoughts, it can only lead us to craziness. Illogical assumptions that have a logical appearance lead to absurd conclusions, which subsequently generate absurd situations in life. Therefore, we must discover a reasonable logic that we can follow safely, knowing that it won't lead us to absurd conclusions. The system of logic we use must help us find out the truth. When we are able to recognize the truth, we know that we are not absurd. Our thoughts are based on what is real. However, which logic will safely lead us to the truth? This is a complex matter. We have to begin by doing some research to get a better understanding. There are many theories concerning different logic systems. Perhaps it would be wiser if instead of following philosophical theories, we'd follow scientific conclusions. However, even science is distorted by theories. Besides this fact, human ignorance prevails. Many past scientific discoveries have no value today. Newer discoveries prove that the first ones were incomplete or totally false. What kind of logical thinking works best? We will never discover a trustworthy system of logic if we continue to think based on human definitions. Nobody really knows what is true or false. So how can you improve your logical thinking skills if you don't even know which logic you must follow? There is a magical solution to this problem that you would never be able to really solve unless you would accept believing in various suppositions. The scientific method of dream interpretation that accurately translates the meaning of dreams reveals to the world the existence of the superior unconscious wisdom. The unconscious mind that produces your dreams has a divine origin. Its perfection is based on sanctity and not on subjective reasoning. In other words, it is based on real goodness and not on selfish thinking. When you learn the dream language and you are able to understand the unconscious messages, you understand the unconscious logic. This logic is based on wisdom and goodness. Thus, this is a safe system of reasoning that will never lead you to an absurd conclusion. Therefore, you should begin improving your logical thinking skills by learning how to translate the meaning of your dreams. The unconscious mind will teach you what is logical and what is absurd. It will also help you to develop your intelligence and acquire complete consciousness. Thus, you'll always be able to find out the truth. Logic and its importance. I like to describe logic as a step-by-step analysis of problems from an objective point of view. Highly logical thinkers are much smarter and have impressive decision-making and problem-solving skills. It is also well known if a person practices logical thinking, he or she can become smarter. At the same time, logical thinking has its limits based on the structural requirements, the exclusion of emotional intelligence, and the generalization involved. Structural requirements. Logical thinking is associated with atheism. I believe this is a result of the narrow thinking involved in logic. I say this because logical thinking consists of ideas, concepts, facts, and conclusions. The reasoning involved in ideas, concepts, facts, and conclusions are developed in a step-by-step analytical manner. In other words, logical thinking is narrow in the sense that logic requires structure. For example, when solving a math problem, to get the correct answer, you must do calculations in step-by-step manners using structured formulas. There is no deviating from the structured steps and formulas in order to get the correct answer. In comparison, some logical thinkers will only believe in tangible reality. They have to see it to believe it. It is impossible, if not difficult, for some logical thinkers to deviate from tangible reality or to believe in the unseen. Emotional intelligence. Logic is also described as abstract thinking, or a higher form of thinking. It is the ability to become emotionally independent by excluding emotions, or emotional intelligence. Making judgments and decisions without any emotional attachments is a powerful tool, especially for people who are emotionally challenged or suffer from depression and anxiety. Emotions can cloud our thinking, leading to poor judgment and decision-making. Keep in mind, emotional intelligence is essential in developing healthy relationships. Therefore, logic by itself does have its limits. Generalization. Logical thinking leads to generalization, which is typically used in scientific methods of reasoning. A general idea, concept, statement, law, principle, or proposition is applied broadly to test a hypothesis. in order to determine a generalized fact. Generalization is similar to stereotyping, which we know can have a negative impact on society as a whole. Without logic, it would be difficult to perform simple tasks such as cooking or planning our day. Logical thinking is essential in reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. Logic enables us to become emotionally dependent so our emotions do not wreak havoc in our lives. Like everything else in life, there are limits. Logical thinking is limited to its structural requirements, which excludes emotional intelligence. Chapter 5. Reading and Thinking with Inductive and Deductive Reasoning. We can distinguish between critical reading and critical thinking in the following way. Critical reading is a technique for discovering information and ideas within a text. Critical thinking is a technique for evaluating information and ideas, for deciding what to accept and believe. Critical reading refers to a careful, active, reflective, analytical reading. Critical thinking involves reflecting on the validity of what you have read in light of our prior knowledge and understanding of the world. For example, consider the following, somewhat humorous, sentence from a student essay. Parents are buying expensive cars for their kids to destroy them. As the terms are used here, critical reading is concerned with figuring out whether, within the context of the text as a whole, them refers to the parents, the kids, or the cars, and whether the text supports that practice. Critical thinking would come into play when deciding whether the chosen meaning was indeed true, and whether or not you, as the reader, should support that practice. By these definitions, critical reading would appear to come before critical thinking. Only once we have fully understood a text can we truly evaluate its assertions. The two together in harmony. In actual practice, critical reading and critical thinking work together. Critical thinking allows us to monitor our understanding as we read. If we sense that assertions are ridiculous or irresponsible, we examine the text more closely to test our understanding. Conversely, critical thinking depends on critical reading. You can think critically about a text. After all, only if you have understood it. We may choose to accept or reject a presentation, but we must know why. We have a responsibility to ourselves, as well as to others, to isolate the real issues of agreement or disagreement. Only then can we understand and respect other people's views. To recognize and understand those views, we must read critically. Thinking is the mental process, the act, and the ability to produce thoughts. People think about almost everything and anything. They often think of people, things, places, and anything without a reason or as a result of a trigger of a stimulus. Meanwhile, critical thinking often means thinking about thinking. In a sense, it is a deeper form of thinking about a particular issue or situation before actually deciding and acting. Inductive and deductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning doesn't guarantee true conclusions. That is interesting and possibly unsettling. Inductive reasoning underlies our prediction that the Earth will rotate to create a tomorrow, and we would like to think tomorrow is a certainty. So let's explore this particular issue of certainty of conclusion and inductive logic in general, and do so through a contrast with another major type of reasoning, i.e., deductive. Now, one often cited contrast between the two highlights general versus specific. In particular, deductive reasoning is said to proceed from the general to the specific, while inductive reasoning as proceeding in the opposite direction, from the specific to the general. That contrasting does give insight, and can prove true in cases, many cases, but not always. For example, in geometry, we use deductive logic to show that the angles of all triangles sum to 180 degrees. And we similarly use deductive logic to show that for all right triangles, the sum of the squares of the two shorter sides equals the square of the longer side. For inductive logic, we might observe our pet and notice that certain foods are preferred over others, and thus generalize as to what foods to buy or not buy for our pet. We make no claims or conclusions about the pets of others. Thus, we use deductive logic to prove a general statement, the inductive logic to make a conclusion about one specific pet. The general and specific descriptions don't quite provide a correct delineation of deductive and inductive logic. We need a more rigorous characterization. Deductive logic, more rigorously, involves use of reasoning structures where the truth of the premises logically generates the truth of the conclusion. In deductive reasoning, the construction of the proof logic and the syntactic arrangement of the piece parts assure that true premises create true conclusions. Why is that? In its most extreme representation, deductive logic floats out in a symbolic ether, consisting of just variables and statements and logic operators. So in extreme, deductive logic isn't about anything. Rather, it is a system of proof. Now in everyday life, we insert real-life objects. For example, we might construct a deductive proof as follows. Samantha is a person. A person is mortal. Samantha must be immortal. Inductive reasoning thus involves our taking information and teasing our conclusions, and such reasoning works due to the regularity of our universe. But why doesn't this guarantee a true conclusion? What's wrong here? Nothing in a practical sense. Rather, the issue is one of formal, logical structure. Specifically, what assumption lies behind inductive conclusions? What do we presuppose will be true? Think about it. Inductive logic presumes past patterns will predict future patterns. That is what we observe now and tells us what will be the case in the future. But that assumption, that presupposition, itself represents an inductive conclusion. We assume past patterns will predict future patterns in a given case because our experience and observations, both formally and in everyday life, have led us to a meta-conclusion that in general, what we observe and know now provides a guide to what we have yet to observe and know. So we have made a meta-conclusion that our world acts consistently, and that meta-conclusion isn't a bad thing. Mankind has used it to make amazing discoveries and enormous progress. But in the world of logic, we have created a circular argument. We have attempted to prove the logical soundness of inductive reasoning using a conclusion based on inductive reasoning. Such a proof approach fails logically. Philosophers and individuals who study logic have dissected this issue in depth, attempting to build a logically sound argument on the truth value of induction. Such an argument may exist, or may not, or some think they might have found one, but more importantly, the issue focuses on the truth value in the formal logic sense. The presence or absence of a formal proof about the truth value of inductive logic does not undermine induction's usefulness. Your pet doesn't mind. It is just glad you figured out what food it likes. Faulty induction. The world exhibits regularity, and through inductive reasoning, we informally and formally tease out findings and conclusions that capture that regularity. But we can be fooled. We can, and do, reach incorrect conclusions. Stereotyping represents a major type of faulty induction. Let's say we see a few instances in which young males are caught speeding. We then take notice of future such instances, preferentially, i.e., the first few instances trigger a tentative hypothesis, and that makes us more aware of examples that fit the hypothesis. Soon, we begin believing all young male drivers speed. However, we have almost certainly overreached. In making our conclusions, we didn't have any widely collected, statistical, valid demographics of whether all young male drivers speed, or even if significant percentages do. Rather, we use selectively collected anecdotal information, making our conclusion too sweeping compared to our basis for making it. Correlation without causality also leads to faulty induction. Let's say we do have good demographic information and unbiased sample data. That data shows that A and B occur together at a statistically significant level. So A might be asthma in young children, and B might be lung cancer in a parent. We conclude a genetic linkage might be present. However, we missed factor C, whether or not the parent smokes. A more in-depth look at the data reveals that factor C is the cause of A and B, and that when we control the analysis for such common causative factors, that we cannot statistically show that A and B are related. In formal studies, such as on health effects, researchers have available and do employ sophisticated techniques to weed out such false causality. But in our everyday common sense, we may not do so as readily. We may conclude certain foods or certain activities lead to an illness or discomfort, but fail to notice we eat those foods or do those activities in certain places. The locations could be the cause, or alternately, we could blame the locations when the foods or activity could be the cause. Insufficient sampling scope can generate errors, or more likely, limit the scope of conclusions. As telescopes and satellites extend our reach into the universe and reveal finer details of planets and moons, astronomers have become amazed at the diversity of celestial objects. In part, this amazement stems from having our only solar system available to study. It was the only sample available, and though astronomers have and had the laws of physics to extrapolate beyond our solar system, exactly what extensions of those laws actually exist in the form of planets and moons remained a calculation until recently. But having a sample of 1/4 types of life certainly limits the certainty with which the astrobiologists can make predictions. An example of faulty induction: motion of the planets. Two great titans of astronomy, Ptolemy and Newton, fell victim, ultimately, to faulty induction. This provides a caution to us, since if these stellar minds can err, so can we. Ptolemy resided in Rome, about a century after the start of the Christian era. He synthesized, summarized, and extended the then current data and theories on the motion of planets. His model was geocentric, i.e., the Earth stood at the center of the solar system. Why place the Earth at the center? Astronomers held a variety of reasons. We will cite one. At the time of Ptolemy, astronomers concluded the Earth couldn't be moving. After all, what would move the Earth? Our planet was enormous. All experience showed that moving an enormous object required enormous continuous effort. Lacking an indication of any ongoing effort or effect that would move the Earth, astronomers concluded the Earth stood still. The error an error in inductive logic centered on extending experience with moving earthbound objects out to planetary objects. On Earth, essentially everything stops, if not continually pushed. Friction causes that. Planets in orbit, however, don't experience friction, at least not significant friction. Thus, while just about every person, every day, with just about every object, would conclude moving an object requires continual force, that pattern does not extend into a frictionless environment. Newton broke through all assumptions before him to formulate a short set of concise, powerful laws of motion. Much fell into place. The elliptical orbits of planets, the impact of friction, the acceleration of falling objects, the presence of tides, and other observations now flowed from his laws. But a small glitch existed. The orbit of Mercury didn't fit. That small glitch became one of the first demonstrations of a set of theories that superseded Newton's laws, the theories of relativity. Relativity, boldly stated, holds that gravity does not exist as we imagine. Rather, objects don't necessarily attract. Rather, mass and energy curve space-time, and objects following the resulting geodesies incurve space-time. Why hadn't Newton conceived of anything like relativity? In Newton's time, scientists viewed time and space as absolutes, immutable, unchanging, and further, that the universe was fundamentally a grid of straight lines. That view fit all the observations and evidence. Clocks counted the same time. Distances measured the same everywhere. Straight lines ran in parallel. Every scientific experiment and the common experience of everyday life produced a conclusion that time acted as a constant and consistent metronome, and that space provided a universal, fixed lattice extending in all directions. But Newton erred. Actually, just about everyone erred. Einstein postulated that time and space were not fixed. Rather, the speed of light stood as absolute and invariant, and time and space adjusted themselves so that different observers measured light at the same speed. Further, given a view that time and space were not fixed, he theorized that gravity was not necessarily an attraction, but a bending of space-time by mass and energy. Newton and his peers erred by extrapolating observations of sublight speeds and solar system distances to the grand scale of the universe. We can't blame them. Today, particle accelerators automatically encounter relativity. As these accelerators speed up particles, the masses of the accelerated particles increase exponentially as particle speeds approach the speed of light. Relativity predicts that. Newton's laws do not. But particle accelerators and similar modern instrumentation didn't exist in Newton's time. So those in Newton's era didn't have the phenomenon available for consideration. And the glitch in the orbit of Mercury did not pose a wrinkle sufficiently large to trigger the thought process that inspired relativity. Did Ptolemy and Newton have it wrong? Wrong would characterize their thinking too stringently. Their conclusions were limited. Ptolemy's Earth-centered theory reasonably predicted the future locations of planets, but would fail in the design of a satellite trajectory to Mars. Newton's laws worked on that satellite trajectory, but wouldn't help in understanding the very subtle impact of gravity on GPS satellite timing. Inductive reasoning, the foundation of technology. The culture of humankind now rests on our technology. We cannot go backwards to a simpler time. The size of our human population and our expectations and routines of daily life depend on the extensive and comprehensive array of technology with which we have surrounded ourselves. While technology has not been an unblemished development, most would agree it has brought much improvement. The simpler past, while possibly nostalgic, in reality entailed many miseries and threats. Diseases that couldn't be cured, sanitation that was substandard, less than dependable food supplies, marginally adequate shelter, hard labor, the threat of fire, minimal amenities, slow transportation, slow communication, and so on. Technology has eliminated or reduced those miseries. Technology, thus, has ushered in, on balance, a better era. But where did our technology come from? I would offer that, at a most foundational level, our technology rests on mankind's ability for inductive reasoning. We have technology because the human mind can see patterns and extrapolate from those patterns to understand the world, and from that understanding, create technology. Look at other species in the animal kingdom. Some can master simple learning, i.e., hamsters can be taught to push a lever to get food. A few can answer a bit more complexity, i.e., a few primate individuals can learn symbols and manipulate the symbols to achieve rewards. Many species, for example wolves and lions, develop exquisite hunting skills. So yes, other species can take experience, identify those behaviors that work, and extrapolate forward to use those behaviors to achieve success in the future. We can consider that a level of inductive reasoning. But the capabilities of other species for inductive reasoning rank as trivial compared to mankind. Even in ancient times, mankind developed fire, smelted metals, domesticated animals, raised crops, charted celestial movements, crafted vehicles, erected great structures, and on, all of which, at the basic level, involved inductive reasoning. To do these things, mankind collected experiences, discerned patterns, tested approaches, and built conclusions about what worked and what didn't. And that constitutes inductive reasoning. As we move to the modern era, we find mankind implicitly understood, and of course, continues to understand that patterns exist. Knowing the benefits of finding patterns and understanding the limits of our innate senses, we developed and continue to develop techniques and instruments to collect information beyond the capabilities of our raw senses. At first, mankind crafted telescopes, microscopes, increasingly accurate clocks, light prisms, weight balances, thermometers, electric measurement devices, and chemistry equipment. We are now several generations further, and we utilize satellites, particle accelerators, DNA sequencers, electron microscopes, medical diagnostic equipment of all types, and chemical analysis equipment of all variations, to list just some. With those instruments, mankind collected, and continues to collect at astounding rates, information about the world. And we have taken, and continue to take, that information to extrapolate the patterns and laws and regularities in the world. And from those, we develop technology. Take the automobile. Just the seats involve dozens of inductive conclusions. The seats contain polymers, and chemists over the centuries have collected numerous data points and performed extensive experiments to extrapolate the practical and scientific rules required for successful and economic production of polymers. The polymers are woven into fabric, and machinists and inventors over the centuries had to generalize from trial and error, and knowledge of mechanical equipment and the principles of statics and dynamics to conclude what equipment designs would be successfully and economically weave fabric. That would be just the seats. As we have stated, inductive reasoning does not, by formal logic, produce conclusions guaranteed to be true. We highlighted that with the laws developed by the luminary Isaac Newton, Einstein's relativity corrected limitations in the applicability of Newtonian gravity and mechanics. However, that the inductive reasoning of Newton proved less than perfect did not diminish the grandeur or usefulness of his reasoning within the scope of where his laws did and still, by and large, do apply. Good inductive reasoning stands as a hallmark of mankind's intellectual prowess. And though it can't guarantee truth, inductive reasoning can do something most would find equally and more valuable. It can enable progress and understanding. Chapter 6. Reasoning Practices with Decision-Making Attributes. Sound reasoning needs to be developed. We have to put some effort into it. There are many things that go into having reasoning skills. Like any other skill, it is important that we have the tools to produce the product. Reasoning skills become better with proper practice. As we exercise ourselves using the guidelines in this ebook, we can become very good at reasoning properly. This is not something just for intellectuals. Anyone who is willing to follow the guidelines in this article can do it. We can all improve our reasoning skills. Here are some guidelines for developing our reasoning skills. 1. Be willing to change old thought processes. We have all accepted ideas we thought were true, only to find out later that they were not right. This does not mean we should be suspicious of all of our thoughts. Most of us are doing very well. However, all of us have thoughts that need some work on them to bring them into better focus to the facts around us. 2. Work hard at maintaining good health. We need to keep ourselves in good health in all three areas of our life. 1. Our physical being should be protected. This is keeping ourselves disease-free. This is a whole new area. There are 10 commandments to good health. 3. Develop our senses of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. This is especially important when it comes to using the inductive side of the logic diagram. This is the area where we make contact with the real world. This is the area where we do true science versus science, falsely so called. There are limits placed on each of our senses. There are ways to overcome these limits through various instruments. When using these instruments, we need to keep records of our observations. The reason we do this is to compare them with other observations and to share our findings with others. 4. Do mental exercises. Working problems that make us think is a good way to keep our minds working. We could do mind-teasing problems. Math problems that have many steps would help. Playing chess is another way to keep our minds working properly. Doing things that are a challenge to us is a good way to keep our minds in good health. 5. Do not follow the crowd. Be willing to think out of the box. If we are going to do our own thinking, we must be willing to think God's thoughts. The Bible calls it having the mind of Christ. This will place us ahead of the pack. Too many of us let everyone else do our thinking for us. This is a sure way to fossilize our brains. We can help people better if we are willing to be the leaders. 6. Function on all three areas of our life simultaneously. These are the areas of faith, symbol, and intuition. Most of us have never seen this done before. You can put these together like a triangle, with each corner being one of these areas. There are arrows going both ways on all three sides of this triangle. Faith is what we believe to be true. Symbol is the physical side that functions from our 5 senses. Intuition is how we feel about our reality. Here are a couple of examples. 1. When we go from symbol to intuition, we are communicating our physical reality. 2. When we go from intuition to faith, we are experiencing our reality through our feelings. How to improve your decision-making skills. When you are faced with a decision-making situation, how do you go about it? Do you decide right there and then, or do you postpone your decision up to some point? While many experts recommend that a decision made quickly has many advantages, it can also lead to blunders. And many decisions are irreversible, if not leading to unpleasant outcomes. A systematic way should be applied to get the most of your decision. Certainly, good decisions arise from a good understanding of the decision situation. If you do not fully understand, or there is a lot of uncertainty in your mind, numbers can help you improve the outcome of your decision. How does this technique work? The method is simple. Follow the steps below. How to improve decision-making skills. Step 1. List the advantages and disadvantages of your decision. Get a sheet of paper, make a 2-column layout, and write advantages at the left column, and at the right column, the disadvantages. List down all of the advantages and disadvantages you can think of related to your decision. Step 2. Rate your list of advantages and disadvantages. Rate each advantage or disadvantage you have listed using a 10-point scale, ranging from unimportant to very important. If the advantage or disadvantage is unimportant, you may just rate it a 1. But if you believe it is a major advantage or disadvantage, you may rate it a maximum of 10 points. If it is neither unimportant nor very important, your rate will be between the extremes. Step 3. Add all of the points. Sum up the points you gave for each advantage or disadvantage of your decision. From the total number of points, you will easily see which column has more points than the other. You may adopt the one with the greater number of points. If the points are more or less similar, you may retry the steps again without referring to the earlier one. This is called iteration. You may do this 3 times to confirm your decision. Evaluating your decision. After applying the steps above and arriving at a decision where the advantages are greater than the disadvantages, evaluate your decision by answering the following questions. 1. Is your decision urgently needed? Do you really need to make that decision? If not, then it is better to give more time to ponder your decision. Uncertainty is reduced with the passing of time. Procrastination can offer more opportunities to clear up issues. 2. Is your decision life-changing? What decisions are life-changing? Deciding to marry or changing your job are examples. This involves lifelong commitment or giving up an equally important choice, so you must seriously think about the consequences of your decision. 3. Who will be affected by your decision? If the only person who will be affected by your decision is you, then your decision should be quick. If something goes wrong, there is no one to blame but you. If your decision affects others, it will be wise to consult them too. How to ask the right question. My problem is that I have trouble keeping my motivation and energy up day to day. I get so scattered and wind up forgetting where I want to go. Do you have any suggestions for making this work on a daily basis? A. One idea that really seems to work is having a daily success program. A daily success program is simply a daily routine designed to create a successful, well-lived day and a successful, well-lived life as a result. More than a daily schedule or day planner, a daily success program is designed to help you create a compelling day, keep you on track with your goals, wake up each day excited to begin the day, and go to bed at night feeling as if you had had a day well lived. I realize that's a fairly bold statement, but here's how it can work for you. What do most people think of when they first wake up in the morning? Usually something like, is it Saturday yet? Or how many times can I hit snooze button and still get to work on time? Not a great way to start the day. I wonder what would happen if you awakened each day and asked yourself, what's great about today? What am I grateful for today? What am I looking forward to today? What can I contribute to today? What small steps can I take today that will have a lasting, positive effect in my life? Now, after a positive start to the day, how do you keep your momentum going? Think small. That's the only sure way to achieve any lasting, long-term change. Skepticism pros and cons. Negative people, or skeptical people, are the hardest of all to reach. They ask tons of questions, and no matter how well you present yourself, or your products or services, they just can't seem to get past that negative barrier and say okay. There are many different kinds of skeptics. Some have been burned in the past, and can never seem to get over it. Some know others who have been burned and don't want to get burned themselves. And others are just plain and simply negative. Every one of us are skeptical to a certain degree, but most of us know that not everything is a scam. In fact, most things that are offered are good products and services. The majority of scammers are put out of business because they run out of resources and have nowhere else to go to scam, or best of all, they get busted and put out of business for good. Don't misunderstand me. I am well aware that there are a lot of scams out there. There always will be. My point is, if you want to reach the skeptics and make a sale, follow these 10 common sense rules and show them that you know what you are talking about and that what you have to offer them is legit and can help them. Everyone has the right to question products and services. I do, and I really do expect everyone to as well. Leave no room for questions and dominate the skeptics. 1. Know your targets and be accurate with laser precision. Knowing your product is one thing, but knowing your target is everything when it comes to a sale. When starting your business, you need to understand the people you want to reach. Strive to understand everything there is to know about what they want and how to get them. Know what sales pitch works and use it as often as possible. Colors play a huge role in the atmosphere you wish to create for your prospects. Using soft colors creates a warm feeling. Using hard colors can create excitement and energy. Different color schemes will generate different results. Play around with colors on your sites or sales pages and use them strategically with your sales pitch. When aiming for your targets, there are many factors that must be considered. Use online tools like articles, blogs, forums, linking to other sites that are very closely related to what you have to offer. Keywords are extremely important, and placing them strategically on your sales page, homepage, articles, and blogs will get your products or services to the people that most want them. 2. Believe in what you say and write. Believing in your own words is confidence pushed forward. If you don't believe in your own words, how can you expect others to believe in what you say? Know your business and know it well. Believing in your own words will keep the skeptics from bashing you. When you believe, it's because you know. When you know, there is little room for question. Knowing what you say is true will build an unbreakable confidence that will not only make others believe in you, but it will keep them listening to you. When you're done, many will research what you have said. If they don't find the evidence, they won't be back. Sometimes, we have a way of explaining things in a way that others just simply don't understand. This is just a part of life. But being honest and believing in your own words is being knowledgeable about what you are trying to get across. If your targets think for 1 second that you are not being totally honest or that you don't know what you are talking about, they will leave your place of business unhappy and look elsewhere for what they want. You will never be successful selling something you don't believe in. Trying to reach that extra target that is already skeptical takes honesty and confidence. Don't lose the trust of your customers. 3. Gain your target's respect. Gaining your target's respect is not only determined by believing in what you say, but it also takes evidence. Show proof that what you have to offer works and works the way you say it does. On your site, offer testimonials and endorsements, and use real ones. Complete honesty builds trust, and when a skeptic trusts you, they will hear you out, completely and fully. Remember that many skeptics are victims of scams. If they don't trust, they won't spend. Make your online business one to be proud of, and help others to reach their goals. So, trust is a vital key to making your online profits real and honest. 4. Relationships that last. Building trust and confidence in your targets creates the bond in a certain way. When two people create a bond, there is a relationship that sparks. Good customer relations will keep customers coming back in the future, and this will definitely build an awesome reputation. The best salesperson knows not only makes tons of sales, but they also build good relationships. They know if they can build a relationship, then reaching those skeptics will be all the easier because they have that bond and trust with others. This in turn will not only create trust and good relations overall, but it keeps people coming back in the future. People who like you will tell others, and this word of mouth can eventually reach a skeptic through a personal friend or just by hearing others speak well of you. Good relations equals good business, and may even impress a skeptical person to look at what you have. 5. Offer guarantees and bonuses. Free trials are awesome when skeptics don't believe. Building trust in a skeptic sometimes takes more action on your part. To eliminate doubt about what you have to offer, let them try it for free for a short time. Give them a taste of what it really is and let them enjoy the benefits for a period of time. Online businesses should not be just about online profits. If your product is one that you can share for a short time, what can it hurt? Some products are not shareable in this way, but many are. Guarantees are very important when trying to get that skeptic to buy. If they think they will never get a chance to get a refund if they don't like what they have, they won't buy it, period. Almost all products online are guaranteed with a refund. This is only fair and it builds trust. Offer some free bonuses to your skeptics. Bonuses are a great tool for sharing that extra information that maybe a skeptical person is looking for. Sometimes a little extra value can go a long way. Incentives and discounts are also a great way to generate those extra profits online and make that online business more appealing to those who are negative and skeptical. Keep it an interesting and irresistible deal. 6. Know your competition and know it well. Knowing how to keep up with your competition will keep the skeptics looking at you. When you can keep up, then you know what you are doing, and this alone can mean a sale from a skeptical person. Skeptics look for those that are at the top. If you're always at the top with your competition, this in return also builds reputation. Know your business and apply techniques that will keep you informed and ready to implement whatever means necessary to keep up or wipe out those that are trying to outsell you. The lowest price wins, and the fact is a skeptic wants the best deal. Be ready to show how your products are better, unique, or more superior than the others. 7. Put your focus on how your benefits will help them and the value it will bring to their life. Skeptics want what they need. They are about them, and that is why they are so skeptical. They don't want to get burned in any way, shape, or form. They want exactly what they need, and no less. Focus on how your product is what they need, and how you can make or save them cash. If your product stirs up a value that hit a hotspot, focus on that area and make it an asset that cannot be refused. If you can show them that they need, that you will give them a good deal and at the same time solve their problems, then a skeptic will buy. We can't satisfy every skeptic, but we sure can try. Don't lose their interest, or you will lose the sale. 8. Never look desperate. This can turn many potential customers away, and a skeptic will surely turn away. So be patient and never look desperate, even if you are. It will come. Profits are here, but you have to be patient and persistent. When your persistent success will show its incredible face, and then all of the skeptics will buy. Brain process when thinking. The human brain weighs about 3 pounds, roughly the size of a much wrinkled cantaloupe. Even though the brain is the seat of our thoughts, emotions, conflicts, impulses, and motivations, it is also the part of the human body about which we know the least, due to its complexity and difficulty in studying its functions. Our brain is like a self-programming computer, whose hardware, the neurons, allows us to feel emotions. Our software, our emotions, in turn, affect our neurons in an endless cycle of interplay between genetics and experience. All our intellectual and emotional abilities are the result of neurons communicating with one another. They organize information in ways that allow us to create mental constructs and categories that stand for and reflect everything we experience, both within and around us. So what is psychological and what is physiological? Everything psychological comes from our neurons' physiological abilities. We have about 100 billion of them, each communicating with up to 10,000 other neurons. Can you imagine the magnitude of activities going on at all times? At birth, our brain already contains most of the neurons, and these stay with us throughout our lives. Even though at birth they are still incomplete. Their development and the particular path their growth will take, in fact, are shaped by the infant's genetics, as well as his or her social and emotional experiences. The old dichotomy nature versus nurture is way too simple to describe the interactions of genetics and experience. While neurons genetically encode the general brain structure, in fact, it is our individual experiences of life and relationships that determine what kind of information is communicated and which pathways are formed and reinforced. Hence, interpersonal experiences, particularly in infancy and early childhood, are integral parts of how the brain works, influencing its function and structure. While the brain may develop new synapses, as it is very plastic and is continuously adapting to the changing environment in which it operates, the main neurological system is pretty much there during the first years of life. This does not mean that an infant's brain is ready at birth, because the way the human brain gets organized is embedded in the context of social and emotional experiences a child is exposed to, particularly those from intimate relationships. Primary among these is the relationship to the primary parent. These interactions can be growth facilitating or growth inhibiting, and are what gives us our human abilities and characteristics. Our brain processes an average of 70,000 thoughts per day, a huge task that requires high skills and organization. Thoughts are influenced by emotions, and these, in turn, influence our thoughts. At times, thoughts reinforce each other. At times, they create conflicts. We have all experienced times when a part of our brain is telling us to do something, like, you should buy those shoes you like so much, while another is telling us to do the opposite. You cannot afford those shoes. You already have too many in your closet. Think about it. We play these thoughts in our mind, at times agreeing with one, at times with the other. What we decide in the end depends on multiple factors: time and place, circumstances, whether we tend to go with our feelings or with our logic, and whether we are impulsive or we think things through. This determines which part of our brain has a stronger pull and influences our decision the most. At times, we get stuck on one thought that we play and replay in our minds without being able to let go of it. At other times, we struggle to collect our thoughts, as they seem to be all scattered and disorganized. But it is difficult to create consistency and order in them. At other times, a thought may pop up in our mind, seemingly out of nowhere. We search for what triggered it, but it escapes us. Chapter 7. Understanding Yourself. Self-discovery is an enlightening experience to lead a wonderful life. We strive hard to understand others in our life, our friend, our companion, our fellow worker, our boss, our client. But did we try to understand ourselves at least for the heck of it? We may know our strengths, weaknesses, abilities, and etc., thanks to the corporate world for making us know that. But there is something beyond this level that has to be discovered. Do you know what makes us happy? What's your level of tolerance? What's your decision-making capabilities? What it takes to change your mood? What's your life purpose? What kind of person are you? The list goes on. Many a time, we won't give much importance to our inner self and focus more on our outer appearance. We go to the gym, use makeup, take diets, and wear the finest attires to look our best to the external world. But what activities we take to see our inner self? Anyone can be like you, look like you in external appearance. All they need is to pursue similar actions to look their best. But your uniqueness is because of your inner self, and it's time to look into it. Some reasons why you should understand yourself. It helps you to discover what is troubling you, instead of feeling bad without a reason. This will lead you to the door of happiness. You will know when to move on from the situation to avoid making a mess or creating a trouble for yourself. You will know where to go or whom to speak to in times of depression. You won't feel like you are lost somewhere because this will help you to fit in the most appropriate place, be it at work or in a relationship. It helps you to understand your true potential for facing challenges and finding solutions. It helps you to identify the deviations and puts you back on track rather than just going with the flow. It will show you what exactly you want from life. You will see the path of your life and your actual destiny. You can't taste the wholesome success without understanding yourself. You can smell the everlasting happiness after achieving life purpose, and that life purpose lies within you. It will throw you so much light on your inner side, which may not have been explored until date. It will help you to understand the purpose of your life existence. If you have never felt connected to yourself, then you will have to find what makes you, you. Explore yourself and begin the search to that ultimate discovery. Here are a few activities which may lead you to self-discovery and knowing yourself better. The initial step will always be difficult, but once you start moving, the momentum will take you forward. Record your life journey. List down your thoughts, ideas, experiences, beliefs, and feelings in a place. It may be in a diary or in your computer, but make sure only you can access it. It's like documenting and summarizing yourself over a period of time. You may not have to do it every day. Just do whenever you feel like writing. Let it eventually grow on time. But do write it sincerely. Going through the document will make you understand the new realizations in your life. Analyze the people around you. There may be umpteen numbers of people in your life, but you would like to keep only a few of them closer. Find out a reason as to why you like being with them. What influence do they make in your life, and how do they lead you in your journey? This will help you to understand what kind of social person you are. Pursue new hobbies. You can discover new interests and talents and divert yourself from doing routine activities. Find your new passion and get insights on yourself. Study your state of mind. Are you uber cool by nature? Usually happy or sad and grouchy? Often stressed or just go with the flow? What would be the reason behind the mood? Can it be pursued every day or avoided? Evaluate your goals. Consider the cause behind the current goal in life. What is the fundamental motivation behind it, and what would be your state of mind if you travel in the other direction from the goal? If you find it hard to uncover the motivation, reevaluating the goal will help you to proceed in the right direction. Critical thinking. Things to avoid doing. We can all learn how to think more effectively. Most of the time, we make mistakes, more or less, without thinking, which seems a strange thing to say. Nevertheless, we do make fundamental errors in thinking, and here are some of the things that we do. This list is obviously too long to remember, but if you recognize some of your own faults, you would do well to make a shorter, more personal list, and then remember the points on it, and then take care to avoid them. Being aware of any sloppiness in your thinking is half the way to avoiding them. Jumping to conclusions. In our rush to draw conclusions from what we find out, we often miss out on vital steps. This is called jumping to conclusions. It is something we all do. Sometimes we get away with it, and sometimes we don't. Jumping to conclusions in written work is usually easily spotted, though it can sometimes take another reader to see the mistakes we have made. Failing to think through implications. Every decision we make, every path we take, in our thought processes has implications that may not always be evident. It is therefore vital to think everything through, as we say, in order to avoid surprises later. Losing track of our goal. Losing track of what we want to achieve is a common fault in thinking. We might get distracted by something that we find particularly interesting, or we might just forget where we are going. Writing down stated goals is one way of avoiding losing sight of the goal. Being unrealistic. Keeping to the plausible and the possible is vital, but using your imagination to think of alternative possibilities should not be avoided merely because it sometimes yields unrealistic notions. Focusing on the trivial. Ignoring what is important and concentrating on what might turn out to be trivial or unimportant can sometimes happen. It is sometimes good to step back from an issue to get some perspective. Failing to notice contradictions. If we invest time and effort into our thinking, it is understandable that we fail to notice things that cancel each other out. Accepting inaccurate information. The trouble with information is that it is sometimes wrong, but sounds right. Checking things out is one way of avoiding accepting information at face value without checking into it. Never taking things for granted is the way forward. Asking questions that are too vague. The wording of the questions you ask is important, both to yourself and to those you ask. If you are formulating questions to ask when reading, be careful to modify them when further information requires you to change direction. Giving answers that are too vague. Being vague can sometimes be used to avoid certain issues. Doing this in writing is soon noticed by others, and you should be aware of doing it yourself. Rereading something you have written can help you to notice something that is too vague before another reader notices it. Asking loaded questions. The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. Asking loaded questions means seeking out answers you want to hear rather than truthful ones. The questions you ask can indicate your prejudices. Asking irrelevant questions. Similarly, asking questions that have little bearing on the things that matter is equally futile. Ask pertinent questions, and you will get answers that you can work with and that push your thoughts forward. Egocentrism. The term egocentrism, self-centered, often conjures unpleasant images we try to avoid. Living in LA is what might come to mind when we think self-centered, is images of SUVs that don't fit on our streets, driven by people simultaneously sipping Diet Coke, filing their nails, talking on cell phones without a headset, and usually blocking narrow roads in the Hollywood Hills. In this context, self-centered means the person is only thinking of him or herself, and not about traffic they are holding up. Their ego is running their life. In this case, it would be more accurate to refer to this as egocentric. When your mind is running rampant with negative thoughts and judgments, what part of you is speaking? For a moment, stop reading. Listen to the thoughts constantly playing in your head. They may be general thoughts about your day, judgments, irrational beliefs, or fears, etc. What part of you can hear them? The part of you having the thoughts is your ego. The part of you hearing them is the true essence of who you are beyond your mind and body. It is yourself. Many refer to this as your higher self. It is constant and always present. When you are centered in yourself, you are directly connected to the source. Your source is the essence of what you are made of. Some refer to this as universal consciousness, divine intelligence, spirit, God, love, authenticity, and whatever that is for you. When I say get yourself centered, I am saying allow yourself to be led by your true essence. When you are centered in yourself, you become aware that all humans emanate from this source. The source is where divinity lives. Therefore, we are all divine. When you connect with yourself, you can resolve self-judgment, which elicits a greater experience of peace, love for self and others, and harmony. Also, when you allow yourself to live from your self-center, you invoke a powerful connection with intuitive wisdom, which knows everything in your life has a reason, and that your life's purpose is unfolding effortlessly. In our world, we easily see how making egocentric rather than self-centered choices is paramount. We see this through an obsessive desire for material acquisition. We see this through an obsessive desire to deny our natural aging process. We see this in the flawed belief that if our bodies are perfect, we can make up for what we believe we lack. We see this through the desire to have the hottest, gorgeous boyfriend or girlfriend to validate us, rather than trusting that we are divine regardless of external proof. Don't misconstrue getting yourself centered as a call to deny comfort and beauty. As long as we are living a human life, why not be as comfortable as possible? I am suggesting that it is a disservice to each other and ourselves when we choose to believe that the car we drive, the lack of wrinkles on our face, our perfect bodies, and our beautiful partner define who we are. The choice I am asserting is to practice being self-centered. Therefore, identify with your true essence, which is infinitely more than your physical reality. What you are, ultimately, is a conscious, divine, loving being having a physical, human experience. Empathy. On the stages of empathy and the need for an empathy-based therapeutic model, empathy is an essential part of emotions and is itself a specific emotion involving a feeling element of connection and a bodily reaction of verbal or nonverbal communication. Empathy in general would mean feeling what the other person is feeling and being in their shoes of another. Empathy creates emotional links and involvement and could be between lovers, family members, friends, or even strangers. Empathy relates to connectedness and a sense of just knowing what another person is feeling. Some individuals are simply more empathetic than others, whereas some individuals could find it hard to relate. Some questions that psychology would deal with are what creates empathy, and why are some individuals more empathetic than others? Empathy, or a feeling of connectedness and being in the shoes of others, is closely related to intuition, as intuition helps in the understanding and recognition of emotions in others. Even if emotions are covert and not manifested, empathy helps in identifying these emotions through intuition. Empathy is thus described as recognizing other people's emotions through intuition and is marked by a feeling of connecting to the other person. Stages of empathy. It could be said that empathy begins with intuition and ends with prediction, is which one person is able to predict the emotional responses of others. The stages of empathy are thus given as intuition, connection, consideration, prediction, motivation. Criticism. We all have one, an inner voice that expresses criticism, frustration, or disapproval about our actions. The inner critic. It might sound like, you should, why didn't you, what's wrong with you, why can't you get it together, etc. The actual self-talk is different for each of us. The frequency or intensity of the inner critic is also different for each of us. It is a cultural norm to believe that criticism or guilt-induced comments will motivate behavior. Perhaps the thinking is that if you realize that your actions aren't good enough or ideal, won't you want to change? The critic also gives us a sense of control. So others in our lives may make helpful yet critical comments to reinforce and control our behavior or control their feelings. We can also use judgmental or controlling thoughts with ourselves as a way of coping with fear, shame, and the unknown. Over time, these comments internalize and become our inner critic, the persistent negative self-talk that keeps us stuck. Unfortunately, this type of communication is anxiety-provoking and shaming, which actually does the opposite of motivation. It triggers us to avoid, reduce anxiety, and stay safe. Avoidance is not the same as motivation to change. Avoidance generally includes things like procrastination, addictive behaviors, checking out behaviors such as constantly checking your smartphone, watching excessive TV, or even avoiding the source of the criticism or shame, such as the person, activity, place, or even yourself. Furthermore, if the messages are shaming, such as, what's wrong with you, or you're not good enough, we can become paralyzed. When we feel shame, we feel that something about us makes us so flawed that we don't deserve to be in connection with other people. Shaming disconnects us from others and teaches us to feel alone. As humans, we are hardwired at a cellular level for connection. When we feel shame, these feelings physically make us want to go inside ourselves, withdraw, and can further trigger avoidance behaviors as a way to comfort or soothe. The point is that shame and self-criticism keep us from doing the things we need to take care of ourselves and ultimately find comfort, connection, and motivation. This has been Critical Thinking, Skills and Strategies for Success and Making Smarter Decisions. Written by Adrian Tweely. Narrated by Weston Gritt. Copyright 2018 by Adrian Tweely. Production copyright 2018 by Adrian Tweely.